Welcome back to the 25 Days of Christmas. My name is Shane Reinert, and we've got another great Christmas story coming right up. If you're tuning in for the first time, you've missed a few stories. There'll be a web address at the end of this program telling you how you can watch those and get back on track and keep tuning in and catch the rest of these great stories. An exchange of gifts. Those who bring sunshine to the lives of others cannot keep it from themselves. Sir James Matthew Barrie. I grew up believing that Christmas was a time when strange and wonderful things happened, when wise and royal visitors came riding, when at midnight the barnyard animals talked to one another, and in the light of a fabulous star, God came down to us as a little child. Christmas to me has always been a time of enchantment, and never more so than the year my son Marty was 8. That was the year that my children and I moved into a cozy trailer home forested area just outside of Redmond, Washington. As the holiday approached, our spirits were light, not to be damaged even by the winter rains that swept down to douse our home and make our floors muddy. Throughout that December, Marty had been the most spirited and busiest of us all. He was my youngest, a cheerful boy, blonde-haired and playful, with a quaint habit of looking up at you and cocking his head like a puppy when you talk to him. Actually, the reason for this was Marty was deaf in his left ear, but it was a condition he never complained about. For weeks I've been watching Marty. I knew that something was going on with him that he was not telling me about. I saw how eagerly he made his bed, took out the trash, and carefully set the table, and helped Rick and Pam prepare dinner before I got home from work. I saw how silently he collected his tiny allowance and tucked it away, spending not a cent of it. I had no idea what all of this quiet activity was about, but I suspected that somehow it had something to do with Kenny. Kenny was Marty's friend, and ever since they had found each other in the springtime, they were seldom apart. If you called one, you got them both. Their world was a meadow, a horse pasture broken by a small winding stream, where the boys caught frogs and snakes, where they would search for arrowheads or hidden treasure, or where they would spend an afternoon feeding peanuts to squirrels. Times were hard for our little family, and we had to do some scrimping to get by. With my job as a meat wrapper and a lot of ingenuity around the trailer, we managed to have elegance on a shoestring. But not Kenny's family. They were desperately poor, and his mother was having a real struggle to feed and clothe her 2 children. They were a good, solid family. But Kenny's mom was a proud woman, very proud, and she had very strict rules. How we worked as we did each year to make our own home festive for the holiday. Ours was a handcrafted Christmas of gifts hidden away and ornaments strung about the place. Marty and Kenny would sometimes sit still at the table long enough to make a few cornucopias or weave little baskets for the tree. But then, in a flash, one would whisper to the other, and they would be out the door, sliding cautiously under the electric fence into the horse pasture that separated our home from Kenny's. One night, shortly before Christmas, when my hands were deep in pepper noodle dough, shaping tiny nut-like Danish cookies, heavily spiced with cinnamon, Marty came to me and said in a tone mixed with pleasure and pride, "Mom, I've bought Kenny a Christmas present. Want to see it?" So that's what he's been up to, I thought to myself. It's something he's wanted for a long, long time, Mom. After carefully wiping his hands on the dish towel, he pulled from his pocket a small box. Lifting the lid, I gazed at the pocket compass that my son had been saving all his allowances to buy. A little compass to point an 8-year-old adventurer through the woods. "It's a lovely gift, Martin," I said, but even as I spoke, a more disturbing thought came to mind. I knew how Kenny's mother felt about their poverty. They could barely afford to exchange gifts among themselves, and giving presents to others was absolutely out of the question. I was sure that Kenny's proud mother would not permit her son to receive something he could not return in kind. Gently, carefully, I talked over the problem with Marty. He understood what I was saying. "I know, Mom, I know. But what if it was a secret? What if they never found out who gave it?" I didn't know how to answer him. I just didn't know. The day before Christmas was rainy, cold, and gray. The 3 kids and I all but fell over each other as we elbowed our way about our little home, putting finishing touches on the Christmas secrets and preparing for family and friends who would be dropping by. Night settled in. The rain continued. I looked out the window over the sink and felt an odd sadness. How mundane the rain seemed for Christmas Eve. Would wise and royal men come riding on such a night? I doubted it. It seemed to me that strange and wonderful things happen only on clear nights, nights when one could at least see a star in the heavens. I turned from the window, and as I checked on the ham and bread warming in the oven, I saw Marty slip out the door. He wore a coat over his pajamas, and he clutched a tiny, colorfully wrapped box in his hand. Down through the soggy pasture he went, then a quick slide under the electric fence, and across the yard to Kenny's house. Up the steps on tiptoe, shoes squishing, opened the door just a crack, placed the gift on the doorstep, then a deep breath, a reach for the doorbell, and a press on it hard. Quickly Marty turned and ran down the steps, across the yard in a wild race to get away unnoticed. Then suddenly, he banged into the electric fence. The shock sent him reeling. He lay stunned on the wet ground. His body quivered as he gasped for breath. Then slowly, weakly, confused and frightened, he began the grueling trip home. "Marty," we cried as he stumbled through the door. "What happened?" His lower lip quivered. His eyes brimmed. "I forgot about the fence, and it knocked me down." I hugged his muddy little body to me. He was still dazed, and there was a red mark beginning to blister on his face from his mouth to his ear. Quickly, I treated the blister, and with a warm cup of cocoa soothing him, Marty's spirits brightened. I tucked him into the bed, and just before he fell asleep, he looked up to me and said, "Mom, Kenny didn't see me. I'm sure he didn't see me." That Christmas Eve, I went to bed unhappy and puzzled. It seemed such a cruel thing to happen to a little boy while on the purest kind of Christmas mission, doing what the Lord wants us to do, giving to others and giving in secret at that. I did not sleep well that night. Somewhere deep inside, I think I must have been feeling the disappointment that Christmas night had come, and it had been an ordinary, problem-filled night, no mysterious enchantment at all. But I was wrong. By morning, the rain had stopped, and the sun shone. The streak on Marty's face was very red, but I could tell the burn was not serious. We opened our presents, and soon, not unexpectedly, Kenny was knocking on our door, eager to show Marty his new compass and tell about the mystery of its arrival. It was plain that Kenny didn't suspect Marty at all, and while the two of them talked, Marty just smiled. Then I noticed while the two boys were comparing their Christmases, nodding and gesturing and chattering away, Marty was not cocking his head. When Kenny was talking, Marty seemed to be listening with his deaf ear. Weeks later, a report came from the school nurse verifying what Marty and I already knew. Marty now had complete hearing in both his ears. The mystery of how Marty regained his hearing and still has it remains just that, a mystery. Doctors suspect, of course, that the shock from the electric fence was somehow responsible. Perhaps so. Whatever the reason, I just remain thankful to God for the good exchange of gifts that was made that night. So you see, strange and wonderful things still happen on the night of our Lord's birth. And one does not have to have a clear night either to follow a fabulous star. Diane Rayner. Keep coming back. There's more great Christmas stories coming on the 25 Days of Christmas. I'm Shane Reinert.